Okay, we're going to jump up. So last week we heard from Pat about junior high. Obviously, Stevens caught us back up with this 5th and 6th grade, and now we're just going to run quickly through the freshman campus. So the freshman campus was originally constructed as West Valley High School. It was built originally in 1955, 1956, was added to kind of as space needs and as the student population changed, was added to a whole bunch of times. I think probably 3 or 4 major times. And then as a result of the new construction of the high school, they went back to the West Valley, the old high school campus. They removed one of the old classroom buildings that I understand was in just terrible condition, removed the boiler room and some other the associated space, and reformed the high school as the freshman campus. So presently the freshman campus is utilized for 9th grade students. Those 9th grade students do attend programs in this building. And so one of the comments that I've heard from a number of individuals is literally seeing kids walk back and forth between the 2 buildings very, very often. With that being said, the freshman campus, just to kind of give you a quick layout. Maybe I won't. Gosh, didn't this happen last time? Magic of technology.
Should I use Google like I did?
Yeah.
Never had those problems with my Mac, but
Yeah. You guys are helpful.
I can tell you how to turn it off and on.
Can you?
I'm in dash yet. So. I would let people forget their phone problems out there.
You're an advanced on or offer. Push a button there.
Function as 4, as 7. Cool. There you go. 15 more minutes.
All right, so this is the freshman campus as it currently exists. The main gymnasium, original in 1955, kind of the old, what people remember as the West Valley High School gym. The original building had a wing that was sat in this area, and then a second wing that sat in this area. About 1980, they came through and added this kind of center portion, infilled between the 2 buildings, and then added the second series of locker rooms and a new auxiliary gyms in the back. So presently the freshman campus supports, as I said, 9th grade students only. That's about 413 students. There are about 20 teachers in the building. I've walked through the building, just to kind of, again, lay of the land. Some of the interesting elements that I observed with this building is I don't know how it really even functions as a good freshman campus or a building for 400 students. This is just this kind of crazy small cafeteria space, which also is an important walkway and hallway. It's just kind of interesting. It's there's a nice kind of circular pattern to this. There's a few exterior doors. So from a security perspective, it's well controlled through a main entry with kind of a similar key card control and push button to request entry. It's got kind of a nice feel on the inside. 1960s classroom building was demolished in 2009, again as part of that project. I've got some funding numbers in here that we need to double check. I think we spent about $8 million, $9 million on the renovation process to get it into its kind of current condition. So every building has a plaque. Every school building has a plaque, and if you walk in basically the main door, you'll see the kind of basic facts of the building. And so in this case, board of directors, school district board of directors, superintendent at the time, the architect or architects involved, and the general contractor. So just one of those things that's always there. So this building was essentially accepted by the district for use in 2010. The parking lot, interesting, when I was there, Northwest Band Jazz Camp was on site. Basically, they take over half the building. It's a really interesting kind of regional use. And after a while, I finally started to figure out why I could hear drums and horns in the background all the time. This is the auxiliary gym. The auxiliary gym was kind of used as a flex space when I was there. Again, kind of a nice practice gym, community space that's available. They have their own weight room. So from a freshman kind of campus, original kind of characteristics to the previous high school use, they've got a nice small fitness room. This is a typical classroom hallway. They did some nice architectural changes here where they kind of put a little bit of a slope or a pitch in the ceiling of the hallways. Nice light colors. They do have walkers. This is essentially all finished conditions and kind of surfacings that were installed as part of that 2009 construction. Building has, interestingly, no one in here can touch the ceilings, of course, but if we walk into some of these buildings, the ceilings are about 7.5 feet tall, so that's kind of doorway height. It's interesting just because of an original building with a ceiling slightly higher, but now we need to stick in a different kind of electrical, now we need to stick heating and ventilation in the ceiling, some of those kinds of factors of modernization, the ceiling starts to creep down lower and lower. And so it's kind of an interesting building in that there are those kind of interior core spaces don't have any natural light. They've got no windows, they've got no skylights. Ceilings are kind of low. As with the rest of you, as you walk through the buildings, I didn't get to see it kind of in use and in activity, but it was interesting just to feel kind of how small, how short the rooms felt, even though the actual physical square footage was typical of a nice large classroom. Nice modern features, whiteboards, presenters, kind of a good, nice handle on current technology. And yet we also see some of those elements of construction and limitations we had. So this wall behind was original condition. It sits right against probably some wood framing and the brick, and there's just no space behind it. And so we have a lot of this surface-mounted electrical services or data, computer-related services. So again, just kind of some of these interesting changes and artifacts. Home economics are kind of a house living program as part of this. Here's your kind of funny, your funny kitchen space. I'm going to get this wrong, but I believe there was only seating for about 160 students. If you provided 10 to a table, there were only about 16 tables. And so even in a freshman campus, you're talking about a 3-event lunch service in this building. Neat wood characteristic, kind of framing up above. It's got a lot of very nice characteristics to it just from the look and how it's been finished. And then we get into the kind of the bathrooms. This is apparently the mosaic. It was probably in style in 1980, between kind of a blue and a peach and a purple. I go outside. All of the, virtually all of the bathroom fixtures, the sinks, and the toilets and the urinals are all original. There's been maintenance over time. It's a nice, effective building. Interestingly, it's kind of landlocked. We're going to get to that next. So this is an aerial photo. I just thought this was interesting and illustrative for us. So we're of course sitting in the building right out there. And you can see that this is our high school building. So the original high school campus, this now freshman campus, sits about here, kind of upside down relative to the last photo we had. We've got a pretty steep drop off in this area. This is district-owned property, primarily down the slope, but it's just that it's a slope. It's not really a usable area, a usable surface. We have a practice football field out the back corner, and then we have our football field and track. So we're pretty hemmed in both here on the east and on the south as far as the campus goes. And then to the west we have a varsity and a junior varsity soccer field. Plus a lot of kind of other developments. There's outfield buildings and storage buildings and whatnot all come with that. So it's kind of an interesting property because we really don't have anywhere to go. And so one of the concepts that have been asked by a community member that I take a look at is, well, why isn't this considered as an elementary school? And one of the interesting comments is we don't even have places for kids to play. So there's kind of some of these limitations that come in. There's also obviously this balance between high school activities on a gym or on a soccer field, community activities, some of those other limitations that come in with our building. And then the last point is we also have our facilities department is in this building. It's a building that they saved. It was scheduled for demolition, but prior to being demolished during that 2009-2010 project, they said, hey, wait, we think we have a good use for this. And so the facilities department moved into that, and I've got a few photos of that. It's turned out to be a very nice building. But as a result of that, we also have a lot of traffic that comes out of the back, just as part of our facilities crew comes and goes through the day to do their work. So we're going to jump into the high school. High school was constructed right here where we're standing, 2007 to 2009. One of the interesting elements that I learned is the district spent some of their money on constructing 6 additional classrooms here on this west area. So to my understanding, we're in an area that wasn't originally planned for, but that the district spent some of our funds because they foresaw the need for additional space. So it's one of those, again, items that we need to go back and kind of document and advise. I know that districts make those decisions out of funds that they have available, and in many cases, those are very critical decisions at the point of construction. You already have your contractors on board, you already have your architects on board, and you ask the question, what does it take from a cost perspective to add to? And so in many cases, those can be very effective additions. I'm working on a project up in Ellensburg right now, and the district on their middle school was able, after the project has essentially been kind of designed and started, they were able to add in an additional gymnasium, so an auxiliary gym, and they were able to add, I believe, 2 or perhaps 4 additional classrooms because they foresee the need for those spaces. So those are some of the interesting elements that when you're in the midst of that design and the construction phase, it's important to jump onto. High school was constructed on what I would call a greenfield, meaning there wasn't a building here, there weren't any other features here to kind of get started with, and so this is essentially an absolutely brand new building, all new parts and pieces as constructed. 20-year bonds paid for the building, so the bonds all pay off in 2026. This is kind of in that technical sense, the newest building. Obviously, we've worked on freshman campus more recently, but again, our plaque on the wall, constructed in 2009. Just some general numbers. Bond was passed 2006, construction 2007 and 9. They sold bonds, about $30 million, $31 million in local bonds that we pay through our property taxes to reimburse, which made a local share of about $33 million. The state match for the construction project was about $21 million, or about 40%. We spent $103,000 on art in the building, presumably the feature that's in the middle. That's part of a state paid for art allocation program. So the total construction of the building, and again, I think these numbers are pretty accurate, is about $54 million. That builds out to about $226 a square foot. Currently, we serve grades 10, 11, 12, and then again, this kind of flexible period of 9. About 383 graduates in 2017. There's some of those kids that get to walk. There's some of those kids that don't get to walk, but get their paperwork done a little bit later, and so that number's a little bit flexible. Right now, we have about 1,183 students assigned to the building. And I'm not fast enough with math, but that looks probably pretty close to what we're doing next year.
Pretty high,
The 1,100. So my understanding is the building was designed for 1,600 students. So again, back to this, how do we go about evaluating it? Let me rephrase it. I believe it was originally designed for 1,500 students, and the additional classroom space provides space for 1,600 students. We've got about 240,000 square feet, which is equivalent to Walmart, give or take. So if you took high school and you smashed it flat, you'd be about the same size as a West Valley Walmart. This is our floor plan. There's nothing too exciting, I guess, to say here. I didn't know for the longest time we had an auditorium. We have a very nice auditorium space here, a nice stage. a nice gym. Frankly, I think the gym's kind of small relative to some of the other districts that I've been in. For us as kind of a 3 or a 4A program. Nice classroom designs and wings, true science classrooms together, a nice CTE program space, kind of the old wood shop, now kind of technology areas. We've got a kitchen, full service. We've got boys and girls locker rooms, both for PE and athletics. Second floor is obviously on the second floor. We've got a nice library that most of us have been in, a fitness lab, which is essentially weights, and an aerobatics and wrestling space, which rumor has it there's also kind of bicycles, but we didn't see any when I walked through the building. You know, one of the prideful elements, of course, of our community is athletics, athletic success. It's awesome to see that in 2005 we thought this board size was going to be big enough for 2006, and yet from a program perspective, programs like cross country, basketball have already gone past the allowed space. By floor, we've got about 48 classrooms in the building. We've got about 8 science spaces, and then we've got kind of a 19 total space. So when we talk about computers and areas that are now being repurposed away from computer labs, these numbers get pretty flexible. Typical classroom space, again, middle of construction. This is a second floor. You know, this modular table is what we see in all of our buildings. This kind of floor covering that we have in here is what we see in all of our spaces. So we're in a very typical room for our high school. Modern lights. One of the interesting factoids that I was provided is that there might be as many as 60 different styles of lights in this building. So it's interesting if you start to walk around and you start to look at the different bulbs, you can kind of see that. I think I counted about 12 in the auditorium itself, 12 different styles. So some of those are interesting. I have a colleague in my office, and her question on any building we walk into is, well, how do you clean that? Or how do you change that light bulb? And so those are some of the elements that are interesting to consider. In our auditorium right now, we can't change a light fixture in the auditorium seating space. There's not a method by which we can actually get up to those fixtures short of bringing in scaffolding, erecting the scaffolding and then changing lights. And so at some point, the district will get to a point where we have lost or burnt out enough of the LED light fixtures, at which point they will have to scaffold the entire space and they will simply replace every light fixture.
What are they, how long are they supposed to last?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I think the challenge with LEDs is the LED we bought in 2005 or 6 isn't the same quality as the LED we go by today. And so that's part of just lighting technology, and we choose the best we can. So they recognized, I'm sure, at the time of design, the difficulty of reaching that ceiling and said, what's the longest lasting bulb or method of lighting? And they chose the LED at the time, which was probably the right choice. It just is a future maintenance challenge for us. Special use areas we've got obviously the commons, the cafeteria, we've got the auditorium, band, choir, and library, family and consumer science spaces, we've got the fitness, aerobics, and wrestling. We've got an outdoor plaza. If you haven't seen it, it's kind of a nice space. It is outdoors, but fully secured, both by a hallway breezeway structure that's present. We've got the wood shop, we've got the manufacturing shop. We've also got ROTC, which is kind of a double classroom space that's used. This is our auditorium, a very nice auditorium, good space, good use, nice durable building materials. These are the lights up above. I didn't really take a picture to focus on the lights, but you can see some are no longer functioning, but most of them are still.
You can't access those from
I am sure you could access a few of these from maybe the top rung of the area, but no, it's my understanding there is no catwalk, there's no access above. So again, a very nice space, nice and used. This is fitness space. I believe we counted 12 individual kind of weightlifting stations. So it's a nice, large space for our district. As a community member, we can actually use these spaces. This is the wrestling or the aerobics room. And as I understand, there are exercise bikes, they're someplace else. The exterior concrete block walls, when we walk around and we see materials like concrete, like we have in this room, very durable materials, if they get beat up or scratched, you paint them and they're fine. When we see schools and we see hallways with a lot of sheetrock down the hallways, that's when damage becomes easy and becomes more difficult to repair. We have a flat roof or a low slope roof, meaning that it's not got kind of a pitch that we would see on our homes. That's typical for construction. It's a lower cost method of construction, and it kind of manages the height and size that we would need to have a pitched roof. Again, the interior, as we walk down the hallway, lots of hard surfaces, hard to damage. The vinyl sheet goods that we just walked up today looks much nicer with a fresh coat of wax. And then modern construction is all about this type of suspended ceiling tile. This building, so when you design a building, you have the option of putting all the heating and cooling capacity in one room, or you have the option of putting heating and ventilation units all across the roof. And so in this case, they did an evaluation prior to, as part of the design process, and they decided that they would rather have an individual heating and ventilation unit per room. And the basis for that was if you lose one system, you're having difficulty heating and cooling a very small portion of your building. If you lose your central plant, you're in trouble with the whole building. So that's interestingly been an issue as they've had some units fail on this building and require replacement. The other interesting element is when you have a central plant, you have a high degree of specialized knowledge in order to know where everything is and to know how that all needs to be adjusted or repaired in certain areas. When you have rooftop heating and ventilation units, you have 10 or 20 service providers in a community where you can simply pick up the phone and say that unit doesn't work, and you are going to have someone who's qualified to go out and fix that. So there's a lot of interesting reasons why they chose that. They're all natural gas systems, which is kind of the most efficient we can do now. Our building systems are all computer controlled in this building. We have some computer controlled lights in the building. We have heating and ventilation that's all computer controlled. It's all set by schedule. The only thing we can do is if we all felt like it was too cold or too warm, I can come over to a panel in the classroom and adjust it by a few degrees and ask the system to adjust. I talked about lighting. Parking, I asked the question, how full does a parking lot get? This comes back to a couple perspectives. One, I was just curious to know whether or not we built the right size parking lot. And two, I was curious to know from Ben McBree, the principal for the building, if he sees a change in the number of cars. Kind of as students and families maybe decide to ride the bus more or be more efficient or not have another car. And the answer is there's always space in the parking lot. And that anybody who is a junior or senior tends to drive their own car. There are portions of the building that don't get used from a parking perspective. We don't ever walk out far enough or need to. Back to my early photo then, building's limited to baseball and softball fields to the south. We can't go to the south anymore. It's all well developed, it's a very nice space. And then beyond that is the hill. We have a fire station here to the west. And then everything else is the parking lot and beyond to the east. Interestingly, I looked at the high school from a growth perspective and I said, what more can we do to this? And I looked kind of here to the south of where we are, and we could essentially copy this room and the adjacent rooms and build the same element down there. So we have some space to add on the building if we need, but beyond that, there was really no design or intent to add additional capacity to the high school. High schools tend to get to that 1,800 student limit, 2,000 students, and that's kind of where, from an educator's perspective, they tend to say that building's big enough. Okay, so that is our high school. Any questions on our high school?
Hopefully it lasts a long time.
It should. It's seems like a good building.
So you said the capacity is 2 here?
No, I believe the building was designed for about 1,600.
And if we had 4 more classrooms, you'd be looking at adding, what, 200 more?
You could add 400 more
400 more?
right now,
Okay.
if you wanted to, from what I added and stuff. far as the freshman center, the first time I walked in there, I was amazed at the quality of the work. They really did a nice job in remodeling. That was an old building, and they did a great job of doing that. What else? I can't read my writing. Sorry. One of the ideas that I have,
Night for Dave? No.
rather than looking at that freshman center as an elementary, and you're right, there is no area, I thought about it, there's no area up there for a playground. Is if we need to, rather than build elementary, move the 9th grade up here, because we have room for it up here, and move the 8th grade from the junior high to the freshman center, and move the 7th grade to, you know, that's an option that we have, and it's not, it's cheap. I've been involved with movement. We moved the 5th graders to the middle school. It took an awful lot of work to do that. But it's an option we have, is to move everybody up. And when I mentioned that at a meeting, people just groaned. But the other thought on that is, if we do that, we make the middle school a self-contained classroom. I mean, not a 5 or 6 period classroom, we make it self-contained, which is what those teachers are used to. And that would make the transition easier for the kids as they come up, is to make them self-contained. But we have, and I'm really happy that we did the space up here, the extra space. We had the money, so we did it. We have the option of moving people along, and what we heard last time we met was growth is not going to be gigantic. It's going to be incremental, but it's not gigantic. It's not something we're going to have to do again in 2 years. If we made a move, we wouldn't have to do it again in 2 years. So, but I was really pleased with the junior high, freshman center. And in the high school, we have 990, I added up 999 expected up here next year. We don't expect 1,100, and we have a 1,600 capacity. So we have a lot of room here, really. That's why you have rooms like this that are empty.
And then I remember during like the, kind of the discussion, there was some dialogue around, you know, with the growth, kind of the external transfers that are kind of occupying space versus, you know, move-in space or growth space. Do we have an idea like how many kind of outside district transfers, non-district folks are in?
I haven't got current numbers on that, so.
I have that.
Okay.
I just got it from Lori the other day.
The ball rate we're talking.
At the elementaries, we've got 57 out of district. At the middle school, let's see, she divided it by grades for me. At the middle school, we've got 34. Junior high, we've got 55. Freshman campus, 22. And at the high school, 54. Yeah. But when you look at it, those out-of-district kids, and by out-of-district, I mean like out of West Valley, not out of Boundary. They're, yes, while they bring in money, they're costing a lot in overload. Those out-of-district kids, just at the elementary, put 12 classes in overload. And cause us to have an extra second grade at a TANF, so.
Can I make just a quick question on that?
Yeah,
Is that distinguished between teacher, students, out of district, like teacher or staff students versus out of district?
no, I don't know how many of these are staff kids.
Because those kids would be allowed in.
Yes, staff kids, yeah, would be allowed in. So yeah, I don't know how many of those.
I think the argument around off, you know, because I know it came up that the money that comes in, but if you replace it with growth, it's a net neutral, right? I mean, you take a kid that's currently getting paid and you plug in somebody that moves into the area or for growth, and you're collecting
Well, and I think we need to dig into the numbers, because I think that's an important characteristic. An overload means that we're paying the educator, teacher more in the classroom. And it means that we're eventually taking space, and we have all these kind of other intangibles that we can't measure to understand how that actually fits. Dave, to touch on your question about school building use, I think that I see kind of a 3-option criteria. I'm not saying these are perfect by any means, but I think you have, as a committee, we need to evaluate K-3 elementary schools. We need to evaluate kind of our current K-4 and what we need to do to those, and we need to evaluate a K-5 orientation. And I think that decision is an interesting balance for me between a district's educational plan and how facilities helps to meet that kind of structure need. And so I don't disagree with your approach on K-3 in our elementary is 4, 5, 6, 7 reallocation of students. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I think that's absolutely one of the characteristics that we need to evaluate. And I think that we need to get the feedback from our educators and the feedback from our professionals in the buildings as to how that works and what the pros and the cons are to that decision. So I absolutely think that that's one of the elements we have. And frankly, that's why I wanted to get the numbers out so that we could start to think about that. Frankly, one of the challenges that I have with how we count space, what is an effective classroom? Heidi Sutton has done an amazing job of figuring out where to put classes in Apple Valley, but what's the minimum definitions of what we would like to see as a facility, as a community, what's the minimum kind of definition of a classroom?
See, what I don't see here is how many classrooms.
Right.
We need to have that. We need to have how many classrooms are in each school, so we can look at how many kids are in each classroom.
We have that, I'm sure, by classroom.
I think we do too, but that's not,
Yeah.
not here.
Absolutely.
See, I'm an old school guy, and I don't see why we don't need, I mean, we can survive with 25, 26 kids in an elementary classroom. We really can. And I'm hearing that that's just not possible. But we had 34 at the middle school when I first started, and that was not possible. But I think we haven't loaded our classrooms yet. We still have room in our classrooms. We don't have to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow hasn't come yet. We don't have the problem that some people think we say we have. And I know I'm in a minority saying that, but I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's incumbent upon us to find the data, develop the data so that we can all make informed decisions. I'm going to walk back through elementary or the administration campus really quick. This is the old admin building, again, 1950s constructed. It's been added on to once. It is kind of in a downturn of use. Right now we have some records storage in there, and we have mostly kind of our HR and employee benefits related staff in the building. It's 1950s ugly. This is the warehouse. The warehouse serves a number of functions. It includes the IT department. It includes the kind of dry goods storage and receiving for things like paper products and computers that the district receives that are transported and delivered to the building. And then now this building actually houses kind of the administrative core. So Dr. Brophy's office is in there, the business department's office is in there, education is in there, so they kind of all take the south end of the building. Much of this building on the top here is now just dry storage space. It's called the shop or the warehouse because it's always been kind of a warehouse. There was a building in 1896 at this location that fell flat because of snow. And so this is essentially a 1997 kind of construction. It's not an educational facility, so I don't have a plaque on the building to show you. Very simple building inside, nothing to write home about. Refrigerators in the hallway, coffee makers in the hallway, microwaves in the hallway. Angela, I think, is probably the only district employee that probably has a sink in her office. Again, because this wasn't really intended to be an office. This is a storage space that's above, currently has some computer records, a couple carcasses of photocopiers, fire system and whatnot. This looks out from that second upon the stored items. You can see a ton of pallets as products come in. You can see all kinds of storage on racked shelves that the district buys in bulk for use later. This is the IT department's, their own hallway that's actually used for a couple workstations. You guys have, what, about 4 offices down there, or 5?
We have 3 people that work in there, and we have 2 offices just past that door. And then to the right of the picture is my office and Ken's office. Ken's office
Yeah.
is our old storage.
And then you guys have an IT
And then
server.
on the other side of this wall, you can see the big door
Yeah.
over there is our data center. So we have some 4 racks in there.
So again, 2,500 Chromebooks went through this hallway as part of their management responsibilities.
So is
this
this a
summer.
little bit cramped?
Slightly, yes.
This is the old maintenance building, couple big garage doors, a little bit of storage. This building sits right next to it. It's a good, usable, available storage. Very simple, very kind of gutted condition right now. Concrete floors, concrete walls, kind of a big open base space. We walked through this as part of a board study session about a month and a half ago. This is an interesting building for us to consider from a redevelopment perspective to generate some of the space we need. And frankly, as we talk about how buildings can be used more, I don't know of another district that actually has school district or school board room that's in a high school building. It's almost always at kind of the central office. So this is one of those buildings where that could become a possibility. Facilities department, again, this is kind of out the back door of the freshman campus. A building we saved was originally the auto shop for the high school. You don't get pictures of that. Here's transportation. Transportation is down on Matanum on about 78, like that, 75th. This is part of a larger parcel that the district owns. Presently, there's a transportation building here in which we do most of our bus maintenance. Anything but kind of major repairs, the transportation department handles in-house. It was constructed in 1993, was part of a grant project, kind of a grant process through state OSPI. Right now it's about 3 acres of asphalted building. April Heiser, who's our transportation director, said that she thinks that probably another 3 to 5 years we're going to need more parking. There's a whole bus rotation process that comes with this as far as how many buses you kind of hold back for replacements when something needs maintenance or breaks down, or how many buses you hold back that are specific for trips, for athletics or other kind of uses. Last 2 pieces, so this is that property, this is transportation. The district owns kind of everything else that's on the tax parcel in brown. It's a total parcel of about 19 acres. About, again, 3 acres is used for transportation, but kind of their probably plan is to keep going to the east. This property represents kind of one of those challenges that we have with many of our properties, is it's kind of close to everything else. In this case, it's really close to us as a high school. There are just no roads that connect us to this property, or it's kind of just down the hill in a nearly literal sense. But right now it's totally accessible just off of Tanum.
Letter to the editor from Trammell Hall saying that's where we need to build an elementary school. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense because we own the land, it's flat, there's a lot of area there for an elementary. But it's closest to a Tanum, and a Tanum is probably our smallest school. It's not where the kids are. I mean, if you build there, you're going to have to transfer kids from all over the place to get there. So I thought it was a great idea to start with, but then I thought maybe it's not a good idea. Because we have that land, and it's beautiful land. It used to be called floodplain. It's not anymore. But it's great, and it's flat, it's buildable. But I'm not sure how practical it is to put an elementary school.
And one of the challenges we have on this property specifically is we don't have any water rates. So we don't actually have a way to keep the grass green. And so, not to say that we need green grass in every school or a lot of green grass, there's an absolute approach that says let's go with a dry landscape, limited grass kind of approach. Let's go by the water rights that we really need in order to keep a small area green. But that's one of the factors there is we actually don't have water. Interestingly, because back to the comments of the what ifs, you know, Tanum is quite close, a couple miles down the road. We've got a water right in the Tanum, and so if we decided someday to abandon the Tanum or to sell it for a different use, we could, you know, keep and move over the water rate. Additionally, the county is in the process of evaluating and documenting kind of water rights and the process by which we could perhaps go out and buy those. So there are some future options as far as getting water, but right now we don't have it.
And it's a stupid question, but I always ask a stupid question. How do you not have water rights?
Well, it's just kind of part of where we are. I don't know if it relied upon a right that came out of your floodplain example, if that was really a surface water out of the creek or what the association was, I don't know.
Or do we sell it?
It's possible, or it's possible that just wasn't there, it wasn't purchasable.
I know that in my neighborhood that was developed about 10 years ago, it had a water right that they sold off separate when they purchased the land to develop. So the water right didn't come with the property. So city water, yay.
And I'm in a similar fashion, 95th and Summit View, is that was essentially Yakima Heights and didn't extend service there anymore. And so when it was developed, I lost the outside irrigation water. So it's all just downhill. The other property that the district owns that's not constructed is behind Cottonwood. So Cottonwood's here. We've got our baseball fields, kind of a Legion baseball field, Cottonwood's grass play field, and then there's about a 15-acre parcel that is not used. This was actually kind of almost sold by the district a few years back, but essentially that sale was stopped because of some issues with floodplains and flood controls. There's an irrigation, there's a ditch that you can kind of see the green of here. It's called Shot Creek, and Shot Creek kind of goes in the wrong place and likes to flood. And so there's a lot of this kind of Cottonwood Grove area that's been flooded a number of times. And so I do have a map here that I'll show you where the county's proposition is to basically come in, take a portion of this land in order to create a new channel for Shot Creek. Oh, look, that's handy. So the blue is what in all likelihood the county will take in order to create a flood kind of control feature. They're gonna basically, you know, cut off the corner of the baseball field and ditch, cut, and canal all the way through. The black box there just shows this kind of construction area that they would use, temporary area for equipment and staging and whatnot. The green is areas that they need to add new vegetation. So that's, you know, in the it's gonna happen phase, it's gonna happen. And so we're gonna lose obviously a little bit of property down the side, at which point we're back to the concept from a district perspective of what value does it have to us anyway. And so it may be excess property at some point in the future for us.
They used to average, when we first put Cottonwood in, that area was gonna be a swamp type learning experience. It was a place where the kids could go out, like we do at the middle school, and go over the creek. They could go over to that area and do water experiments and all this stuff because it was so damn. I think this makes a little more sense.
So this, of course, will in effect dry out all the other land, so this becomes completely buildable, and then a lot of the property down here also becomes completely buildable. So one of those areas where we're likely to see development when this actually gets constructed, when that improvement is accomplished, is you're going to see these areas of properties go dense with homes because they're close enough there to already existing services. East Nob or Nob Hill doesn't exist. My understanding is there is not a kind of established easement or right of way for much of Nob Hill, and there's some parts and pieces that are missing. But connecting Nob Hill from 80th through some open fields and then along the south of this development all the way over to 96 is kind of one of those 6-year transportation improvement plan items. Okay? All right, anybody have any other questions? All right, we're gonna call talking about facilities and what we have done. Okay. With that being said, let's talk really quick about facilities and what we have. This is, and I'm just handing out the buildings that you're familiar with. So which building do you want?
I had, some.
Did I miss anybody? Every 6 years, the school district can apply and receive a grant fund for what's called a study and survey. A study and survey is essentially an outside evaluation by an architectural firm as to kind of the condition and care of the facility. So this just happens to be the study and survey that was completed for the district in 2014. Okay, and in total, it's about 200 pages. I wanted to bring this to you just because this is what gets reported to OSPI about our kind of current condition of the buildings. So you're welcome to take a look through this, kind of evaluate it against your own observations as you were through the building. It includes the very basics of how big is the building, how many classrooms do we count in the building, what are they used for, and then most specifically it gets back to the kind of what is this graded condition of the building. So just like whether or not we have students' achievement scores, we have kind of building achievement scores. Buildings can be rated, or systems or parts of buildings can be rated as good, fair, poor, or unsatisfactory. And then in the far bottom right corner is the number that matters the most. We've got a grader, which is, how much of an 100% quality is a building. Well, I just happen to hold Mountain View, and Mountain View is currently judged at about a 63%. So it's an interesting balance on all of our buildings because it takes into account kind of the planned wear and tear on a building. So even the high school, I don't believe I handed anybody to high school, but I believe the high school rates is a 95 or a 96 because it's still a good new building, and yet there's already going to be some anticipated wear and tear. There's going to be essentially use of the system, use of the heating and ventilation, and those kinds of features. So it's just a grade on how our buildings look. Mountain View suffers not because the building doesn't look good, but because some of the underlying systems are old. The underlying pipe, the underlying electrical service, some of those features are old, and so that's why a building like Mountain View might get graded low. It's original, 1950s structure on the building, and so that's why it's below our goal. I think these numbers, take them with a grain of salt because they are kind of point in time what somebody thought, and because they're trying to make sure that the building fits in the general understanding of where the condition is. They're not some kind of really, really detailed evaluation of everything in a building, but again, they're just service guides so we can understand how our buildings are kind of sitting today. So the district will do this again in 2020. It'll be an element that, again, the facilities committee will discuss when we get to the point of doing that, and then obviously review the data as it comes back. So you're welcome to keep that, take a read through it. If you're interested in any of the other buildings, I've got the whole document available.
Could you send that to me?
The whole document?
Yeah, appreciate it.
So I have a question.
Yes.
With our report,
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out how that translated, because the one I went to was Autumn Valley, and the Justin score was 54, but when I look at what was reported, it shows 50.97 as poor. I mean, isn't that information that was taken to make this report?
And this has 3 years more wear and tear.
3 more years of work.
Yes.
So this was taken into consideration for this.
Yes.
Okay.
So 2014 document is your study and survey.
Right.
This is kind of 2017. It is also a different evaluator. This is more of an internal to the district evaluator.
Okay.
So you've got a little
So they've
bit.
taken several reports and combined them to come up with that. Okay. So this is actually the most current that we have.
Yes, but it's still, trying to use an educational analogy, it's still kind of, it's not the end of the quarter. It's still kind of in progress. It's still being graded by somebody.
Okay.
Don't live and die by the number.
No, right.
Live and die by the generalization of the number. And as we get to buildings that are 60s or 50s or 40s, those are just buildings that, from a general use perspective, would be viewed as having been well loved.
Okay. I was trying to understand how to use that.
Did you want to see this one? So if anybody's, has everybody found their page? So let's just go through it really quick. Once again, Mountain View scores a 63.
Right.
You want to high school? Okay. The freshman scored is a 98. Seems a little bit generous. High school should be a
98 also.
98. Which building did you have, Jerry? Apple Valley score as 50.
Whitehall is 73.
And Summit View, it was 44.
So Tom Valley is 54.
Middle school is 85.
Cottonwood's 55?
Junior high, excuse me.
No way. Conway is.
Cottonwood is 55?
Well, and it makes me wonder,
That's
because
really,
I'm at Cottonwood and I know who signed the evaluation here, and his kids went through Cottonwood. So it makes me wonder if he just is a little more knowledgeable about Cottonwood and our issues with the building.
No way.
Does math get told?
that doesn't make sense.
So it makes me wonder if it's the same evaluator on each.
Everything was evaluated by the same provider.
Brian.
People?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
There's no way Cottonwood's.
no way could that be.
But some of the things that were rated down were, which surprised me, the floors were really good in that building. But the roof, I don't know, I never go up there. The walls, the ceiling, plumbing, heating and cooling is an issue there. So some of them, I mean, I would agree with half of the core ratings, but I don't know what Brian was looking for, so.
Whitehall had 2 core ratings.
So this document is more recent of where the ratings are lower.
Yes.
Because this has the high school at 90, for instance, which seems kind of high.
Well, there are guidance curves that the state provides that says in the first 10 years, you're going to lose 10%. And then it's got a more rapid downturn. And so by the time you hit year 30, the state's model suggests that it should be at a 55 and should be ready for replacement or modernization. So there's some built-in guidelines for the curve.
But Ryan, do we know who reports this and what reports are looking at?
Wasn't it Angela that does that?
The ICOS,
Yeah.
this is reported by the school district as part of our demonstration to the state that we are effectively taking care of our buildings.
Right, but there might be several people that input different, like Tim may input his information there, and Angela might input whatever else. And so,
Let's ask that question when we have them in the room.
because, I mean, I've expressed this before, that I don't hold much weight in this ICOS report because I've found errors all over.
Well, and as a facilities committee, I think we should take the opportunities to update it and provide our recommendations for changes.
Well, and especially with the classroom instructional space that's reported on this document for the items. I think that's something that is very misleading.
Jeremy, what building you end up with?
Junior high, 69.
69? That seems overrated based on
It
the
does, really.
presentation.
So how are we supposed to make some sense out of these numbers then?
I think the junior high custodians are doing a hell of a job.
Well, yeah, I would say that's the same out there.
I just think we should take those as a general understanding of where our buildings are now. I think it does assist us in having a priority list. Our lowest score in the room, I think, was some of you.
Yes.
And does that surprise us? No, it's the oldest building. It's the most kind of cramped building. There's just system challenges. Our second is Apple Valley. Again, does that surprise us? No. So when we looked at that, even from the more, the less involved process that we had for the previous bond conversation, those are obviously the elementary schools that we looked at and said, hey, these buildings are worn out, they need to be replaced, let's go through the opportunity in these areas of our district that we expect to be growing, both as we have changeover between kind of our retirees that are gonna move out of Summit View, are gonna either move into smaller apartment style living, or maybe go find someplace even warmer than we are. You know, you're gonna have some changeover in those communities, and you're gonna have a different influx of students. So we looked at Summit View and said, hey, this is where we expect that we're gonna have increased student populations. Same, obviously, with Apple Valley. We looked at that and said, hey, we're gonna continue to have a lot of development in the area, we're gonna have more capacity. So those are some of the factors that we play in, and those are some of the elements that frankly, I don't know that we have anybody out there that's gonna provide us the forward-looking answer that says, yeah, you're not gonna have a whole lot of houses, but your demographic in your community is gonna change. And I think in some areas, like some of your example, it's just a demographic change that we're gonna have to do our best as a facilities committee to try to evaluate and recognize and hopefully plan for well.
Is there a point, a number where the state says you've got to replace that building?
Condemned point?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
There's not?
No.
I would imagine if it rates a 1 on that rating.
Or remind us the number.
But in a literal sense, it probably does come back more to a condemnation process that a county or a city would go through. The intent of OSPI, I'm almost sure, is not to take away a building that is needed or usable. And so I'm sure that they do everything they can. I've been to schools, kind of the one building school district. I've been to schools that really, really are in very, very rough shape, and yet they're still vital to their communities that OSPI can't afford. No, no, there's just no dollars there.
Sela had an elementary school where the second floor was condemned,
Yes.
and they put the administration up there.
So I wanted to introduce that. We're going to go through this. So this, again, is your target numbers. So we just have that for kind of information. We're going to build back before our next meeting an understanding of how many classrooms we have.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to overwhelm you with information. If anybody else wants more to read, I've got another document you're welcome to take home. This is a boundary committee report. This is kind of an envisionment of where we're going to go. I think we're going to have a different presentation, but the intent is to kind of provide a framework so you can kind of start to think about some of the factors that come into how we're going to orient our district, the considerations that we might want to plan for. Some of the features that, in this case, Mercer Island went through was transition planning and transition years, and how they were going to address some of those, and just some kind of general factors that will help us. So, anybody have any more questions? We've got about 10 minutes left, and then we're just going to leave early tonight.
I do have a question, Ryan. So I'm hearing several things come out of the suggestions on the chart for this committee. Reboundary, restructure our grade levels, and rebuild buildings. Are all those things up for discussion in this committee, or
Charge number one is to provide an elementary boundaries report. And so the intent of that is to provide a recommendation to the school board as to what changes we would recommend in order to balance current student enrollment and anticipate the growth that we're gonna see in the next 3 to 5 years.
Based on our current
Current.
schools and current school structure. K-4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yes-ish?
Okay,
I don't think we're limited by the box. And if the committee wants to draw lines, then let's draw lines. If we want to not draw lines and say that we're open to any possibility, then we can do that too. So I developed the charge, I hope, to be both specific to the goal we need to accomplish, but broad in the mechanism by which we get there. And so,
It's not necessarily to redraw boundaries of the elementary school. That's not our job.
if we believe at the end of the day that we don't need to redraw boundaries, then I think the committee comes back to the school board with a recommendation of, we don't want to, we've evaluated, here's the methods by which we've done it, and reboundaries is not needed.
Not the option.
Or if we want to radically change the system, I think that that's in the same sense. I think a district always faces this interesting boundary between affect as few families as possible versus affect a large enough percentage that everybody feels it, that's an impactful decision. And I think that's the interesting challenge is, as a school board, you heard from much more directly families that were going to be directly impacted by the proposed reboundary. And I hope through this process that we hear from our community, such that we bring a full presentation of how our district feels about those changes and how we should orient it. So,
And the thing that I heard was, let's not do this again in 3 years.
absolutely.
And we have to, in my opinion, proceed under the assumption that our facilities aren't going to be drastically changing in the next 10 years. Because we don't know if we're going to pass a bond or not. We'd like to, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen.
I don't know, it seems like it's gonna have to get worse before we pass it. I'm not sure. And I'm not talking as a school board, I'm talking as a person. It seems like it has to get worse than it is now to pass a bond limit. You know, that's what's happened in the past. That high school was a mess before we built another one.
So, and just, sorry to finish my thoughts. I want enough educators in the room as it is, and enough voices that speak to the benefits of learning. I mean, I know that in a classroom when there are too many kids, my kids don't get paid attention to. I know that when there are cramped conditions, that there's not enough space, and the kids are all bunched up. And so this comes back to that tug of the pull between facilities and education. And as a facilities committee, we need to help devise a strategy that provides this, the kind of the spaces and the availability that we need in order to provide good learning environments for our kids and good teaching environments for our staff. So I think that's the tug of the pull that we always have between facilities and education, is how do we find that balance that doesn't overbuild, doesn't make it too big, doesn't lead to some of those kinds of potential criticisms, and yet is what we as a district or we as a community find to be valuable. So we have 12 baseball and softball fields in our district. We have a big district. I don't know that 12 is the right number or the wrong number, but I also look at it and say, wow, we have 12. You know, we've got a practice football field, an actual football field. We have football field at the junior high.
We got one middle school.
So you got 4 football fields in your district. You got another 4 soccer fields in your district. It's, those kinds of features are this interesting balance between what a community values and what a community needs. And so let's take the same emphasis that maybe we put on the number of sports fields, and let's make sure we're doing the same thing inside the buildings. I think the other interesting question that I continue to have is the balance between space for what I'm gonna naively call core education, space that we need in order to provide the required supplemental services to that core education, and then the space that we provide for other uses, community uses, non-kind of core or special required programs. How do we balance those as a community, as a facilities committee? I don't know the answer to that. You know, we're gonna have a classroom up here. One of the former computer labs is gonna become a kind of a small group room for kids that are going through drug and alcohol concerns. Seems like a very, very valuable community resource, and perhaps it helps to serve some of those underlying special needs or core functions. But what's our balance as a community to having those and potentially to having extra space that might otherwise be a typical English classroom or something? So I think those are the hard things, and I'm just trying to ask questions so that I can provide you guys the information to make your own decisions about where that balance lies. And that's why I think as many views as we can have and as many community members that we can hear for, that's all better.
Well, I think attendance tonight's a little down, but this is the middle of vacation.
Yeah.
I think it'll get better.
Okay.
Brian, your educator kind of question is a difficult one. Those educators who consider it to be a profession are going to find a way to get the job done regardless of tight spaces and all those things. But the longer the time goes on, we've got less educators considered a profession. And those that come in for 2 or 3 years and go, doesn't do it. The amount of money I've got to pay to continue schooling, the amount of loans that I made, I'm not making it up. So that's kind of a difficult question to really answer.
And I've been in his classroom when he had like 30 kids in there, and it was miserable. Hot, and there's no air conditioning. And I kind of know what he's talking about. He went through some difficult years. But hopefully, with the change in the, and we don't know about budget either. God. But hopefully, within a year or two, starting salaries are going to increase. And there's going to be a cost of living increase again, finally. And things are going to get better, in a couple of years. So.
But I think Jerry makes a good point, because I taught at Apple Valley. It was horrible. That was a hard year, because I didn't know where the front of my room was, because the design of the building, and that just makes it hard to do your job.
Well, that's such an interesting challenge between putting an educator in a space and I want to put them in a space not where they can work hard and be successful, but where that space promotes their success and provides them the ability to get more out of the kids and develop more. And so it's an interesting balance. And again, I'm not an educator. I don't have that kind of instruction of 30 kids running under my ankles. The 3 that I have in the house are enough. But yeah, that's the views that I need and the help. And so that's the balance that hopefully we can provide as a facilities committee to answer some of these questions. Robin had asked one question, and we have 3 minutes to talk about it. Do you want to ask that question earlier?
When I
That
first
you're around,
arrived?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I haven't heard any discussions at all regarding year-round schools as a possible consideration.
I don't think we're to that point yet. Year-round schools, and I've been around people talking about year-round schools in other districts. Well, and I hate to say this, but sports, it really screws up sports to have year-round school, because you've got kids going to school in the summer who want to play football in the fall, but they're not in school in the fall.
talking about a year-round school for an elementary school site,
Just elementary.
just elementary. I've had situations in Nevada where it's been highly successful, where they took like the 6 elementary schools, they had, as an experimental, they had one elementary school decide to be a year-round school, and they had it on a 4-track basis as a way, and it was elective for those parents who wanted to try it out. And they made it so the siblings would all be on the same track. But I mean, I'm just considering, you know, if we're looking at all the options on the table, that's one option I haven't heard even considered. I'm not talking about getting it into the sports and the upper grade levels. But I can tell you that that particular school, because it was used as an example, and it was actually studied, and the kids that attended that school, you did not have the brain drain for the summer months that you had to go back and remediate over for 3 months to get them back up to grade level to get started with them. That school did very well academically, being on the 4 different tracks.
Well, did that situation reduce the number of kids,
Yeah,
but they could go all 4 terms? Or not? They can go 3 terms or 4 terms?
well, there's different schedules that you can look at for a year-round school. You can do a 4-track. There's all different kinds of options for year-round school.
Did it result in more capacity?
It resulted in more capacity for the school district, and the year-round school, students did better academically when compared to the other elementary schools.
See, I would agree with the year-round school for everybody.
Yeah, but you know,
But
you've
we
got
can't
the
afford it.
whole change model where people who aren't familiar with year-round school, you've got that whole acceptance factor, and it's better if you could gradually ease people into it, because a lot of people right away, oh no, I don't want to do that, that messes up our vacation plan,
Vacation.
that messes up.
Vacation's easier in year-round school because you can travel during slower times.
Exactly,
Cheap.
I'm all about this.
exactly.
For the going places for cheap.
But I mean, it is an option
Yeah.
No.
that might
Yeah.
be
It
worthy of
it may be further outside of the box than we want to go, but she asked a question, so I figured we'd.
And I think in
It's
this
just
valley,
an option.
when did Yakima do that? And did they do it at all the schools, do you remember? Yakima did that, and so I think they've all gone away from it now.
I don't know.
But I don't think it was all the
Discovery
elementaries.
Lab, I think.
Discovery Lab is still year round?
They were, I don't think they are anymore, I think they abandoned.
Yeah, I think there were, I want to say like Barge, Adams, I feel like was year round.
I'd love to look into that. It'd be, you know, a great thing, just like
Subcommittee.
moving 5th grade to, you know,
But what do you do with families who have older kids and younger kids, because then you're gonna run into the issue of.
Well, that's why the families got to choose which track, if they had the older and the
Oh,
younger
okay, I
kids.
see what you're
If
saying.
you
So
had, it
could
was
do a
just an
traditional
experimental
schedule.
at one school, they did it on a 4-track basis. They had never had a problem with people not filling classrooms at that particular
So
school.
you would give families the option.
Yeah, they would get the option of which track they got to choose. Next.
that's option number 7.
There you go.
Yeah,
Just a concept. 7 o'clock, anybody want to stay around any longer? Call it good.
So the next meeting is scheduled to talk about our elementary boundaries.
Yes.
Report,
Yes,
draft report.
We will have numbers in classrooms.
we will. I started the framework of the report, so we'll add some nuts and bolts to it. We're probably behind schedule.
That's right, we're not in any rush, are we?
No, I just, as Mr. Thorner asked, it'd be good to have enough time for the board to hear good conversation that the changes proposed are significant.
Yeah, sure. But with the change in the budget process, we're not in any rush as far as looking at one level.
No, absolutely. Well, I think we need to consider as a district, you need to consider when when there's when there's a more certain understanding as to the state-provided funding, then we need to go back and ask the question, what do we need? Do we need a levy? If we need an enrichment levy, what do we need in order to kind of meet our financial projections and whatnot, so. And, you know, I don't know what the answer is gonna be, because I don't, as you know, my graph was a little bit wrong last time, but we're gonna pay $7 per thousand, each of us in our own homes, in order to, you know, address the kind of school composite property taxes.
For this next
For
year.
2018, yeah, all of 2018. So it's gonna go up, and it's gonna be, you know, even in our district, it's gonna be $250 a house, another 20, 30 bucks a month. So,
That's not the time to run the levy.
and yet, that's when we have to, if we need those financial resources as part of our enrichment levy, that's when we have to do it. So, yeah. Okay. That's the plan. Have a great rest of the day. Tell everybody who didn't come, we got done at 7.
That's good.